only in the case of violation of fundamental rights, this petition is to be filed. Therefore, that stands suspended. But Article 226 does not stand suspended because that provides this petition for two purposes. When the fundamental rights are violated, and second, when any other provision is violated. So, Constitution makers has made Article 226 that petition non-derogable, whereas our learned judges found that from experience of America and England, we learned that this petition is suspended. Then that judgment of ADM Jabalpur is astonishingly contradictory. They say that this court has got no right to hear the writ petition. Then three judges has made clear that there are certain circumstances when we have right. When there is either right or no right. If there is right, you say that there is right. You say that constitutional provision is suspending the writ petition, it must be suspended fully or not at all. How can it partly be suspended unless there is some specific provision about partly suspension? So, performance of Supreme Court also was not to the mark. Therefore, my finding is this, that the rights during emergency were neither protected by legislature nor executive nor by the judiciary. And Parliament has written that during emergency all the institutions failed us. President failed us, Parliament failed us, judiciary failed us, and even the cabinet failed us. This was the situation of emergency. Now, after emergency was over, it was realized that there is some lacuna in the Constitution, and Constitution was amended. Article 359 was amended, certain other provisions were made. In that Article 359, two articles were made non-derogable, Article 20 and Article 21. These two articles were made non-derogable, but the experience that International Covenant of Human Rights had made 7 rights non-derogable, that was not taken into consideration. So of course, at that time, when Constitution amendment was made, India has not accepted the covenant. We ratified covenant in 1997. Prior to that, the Constitution was amended, where only 2 rights were made derogable. The International Covenant makes 7 rights derogable. So far as international law is concerned, that also was not observed even after experience of the internal emergency, as to what has happened during internal emergency. My findings are that the international law, which is a law which every civilized country must accept, has not been accepted in India as it should have been accepted. No doubt, we are following dualistic theory about the relationship of international law with municipal law. But that dualistic theory does not mean that when we are of the view that certain important rights are to be observed, we should not follow them. And then, the difficulty is this, that we have forgotten that human rights are so much important in the life of every individual that they deserve to be protected as much as protection is to be given as possible. That international law has to be observed. The subsequent developments are there, where the court has said that we have to harmonize the international law and human rights principles with municipal law. The relations of municipal law, though dualistic, but it must be diluted and it must be made harmonious. These are the main things which are covered by me and my this. And my one more important thing which I have found in this investigation is that the derogation. What is derogated? Whether human rights are derogated or protection to human rights are derogated. I have found even judicial decision where it is said that human rights are derogated. It is said that right to life is derogated, right to personal liberty is derogated. I find that this is not correct finding of the court. What is derogated is protection to the right. My life is not derogated at all. Life remains, but protection given to the right by the Constitution, that is derogated. So this is one of my main findings in this, that derogation is not of the right, but derogation is of the protection of the right. I have analyzed the performance of all the three organs of the government, executive, legislature and judiciary. I found that all these three organs failed us during the internal emergency. Though during other emergencies also, there were three emergencies which are programmed. During other two emergencies also, the human rights were not respected as they should have been respected. But the misuse of the power was limited. During internal emergency, the misuse of power was great. And because of that, the constitution, the new government had to amend the constitution. There also I found that new government has not taken into consideration fully the requirements which were necessary to protect the emergency. So my findings are that the people of India were failed, all the three organs failed the people of India. Legislature, executive and also judiciary. That's
Thank you. Thank you for this enlightening presentation, Dr. Lalwani. First few questions, as it always happens, they arise out of curiosity of the examiners. So the first curiosity, which I think I'll share this with Madam Professor Arora, is that at this right page, why did you decide to do such a momentous work?
It's, first is thanking you for the presentation, nice presentation. Now his curiosity is, at this such a ripe age, why did you take up this
Challenge.
adventure?
Challenge.
during emergency period, whatever was happening, that upset me greatly. And therefore, I thought that I should see what is the legal position in our country and what is the legal position in other countries. Therefore, I took mainly international law for comparison to see as to what is the position of international law and what is the position of constitution, and found that constitutional provisions are much derogatory to the provisions in international law. The International Covenant makes difference between derogable rights, non-derogable rights. Constitution of India at that time had not made difference between derogable and non-derogable rights. Subsequently, only 2 articles are made non-derogable, whereas international and American Convention, there are 11 rights which are non-derogable. In International Covenant, there are 7 rights which are non-derogable. Of course, so far as European Convention is concerned, there are 4 rights which are not derogable. But then, subsequently, protocols have been passed where 2 further rights have been made non-derogable. So, European Convention is now having 7 rights as non-derogable, whereas America is having 11 rights. And then, apart from these 11 rights, American Constitution says that writ petition shall never be suspended. That is additional by way of interpretation of Articles 27 of the American Convention on Human Rights.
From the initial pages of the thesis that I read, I came to know that you have also done your PhD on a similar theme. His PhD was also on the similar theme of violation of human rights during emergency. So a logical corollary question which comes here is that coming from whatever knowledge you gained from your doctoral thesis, how this thesis is different or an advancement of what you did during the doctoral work?
No, sir is saying that the initial pages from your thesis, he has found that you have done your PhD in philosophy, this political science also. So, he is asking in what respect this particular delict is different, because the topic is analogous to the topic which you have taken up in PhD. So his question is how does it differ from that PhD doctoral thesis?
And PhD, I had considered certain aspects of the emergency, but they were from political science angle. Here, mainly it is a legal angle, though political touch is there, because political science and law, they cannot be bifurcated. They have interlinked subjects are there. But here it is mainly a legal study. And the topics which I have covered in this table, they are different from that. That was 5th Lok Sabha's performance. My topic for PhD was 5th Lok Sabha and human rights. So I had considered social and economic rights, political rights, civil rights, etc. and how far those rights were derogated during emergency. But here, my angle is legal. Mainly, it is legal. And initially, I will submit that I had decided to submit for LLB. But then I chose that some subject also is covered by political science. Therefore, I find important political science.
I think if we look at the methodological dimension of the thesis that you just talked during your presentation, one very insightful aspect of the thesis that, as you just said, that you have made a comparison between different documents or different constitutions, whether it is the UK or USA or the covenants, international civil and political rights covenant, or maybe you have also referred to UNDHR, which is United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And you have compared that with derogable rights in the Indian Constitution. So a question which arises from that kind of a work is that when you focus on human rights, often we talk about different generations of human rights, right? So there are people, there are commentators who have said that we can talk about 4 generations or 5 generations of human rights, starting with civil rights and political rights, economic rights, social rights, and now we are talking about green rights and also group rights. So in that context, when you're talking about human rights, during states of emergency, you have distinguished between external emergency and internal emergency. Which rights you think are more under attack from the state during periods of emergency if we compare different generations of human rights?
This is with regard to different generation of human rights. You have compared it, the human rights, this thing in different countries and all that. Now, sir is asking you, which right you consider most important, which has been under attack in these 2 emergencies, external and internal and all that. Because
The right to personal liberty and even right to life, both were greatly attacked. We are not having much statistics as to how many persons were tortured. Of course, at least I could not find how many persons were tortured, but there is definitely evidence that many persons were tortured and some were killed. We are knowing only one main person, that is Rajan. He was arrested and killed. The writ was filed by his father. In writ petition, it was said that writ petition is not made available because of the emergency. When this writ petition was came in his hearing after emergency, the Kerala Chief Minister had filed affidavit that he was not taken into custody at all. Then it was found that he was taken in custody and he was killed. The then Chief Minister was required to resign because of this incident. So my submission is that a violation of life also was there. Right to liberty was there. And these are 2 basic rights. If these 2 rights are violated, other rights have no meaning. If I am detained, my right to business is automatically going away. My right to speak is going away. So detention affects many rights and death affects all the rights. The only case which is reported in the judgment, that is Dr. Rajan. But as other findings I have seen as to how many persons were tortured and how many persons were killed, and I came across that literature which showed me that a number of persons were killed. About those killings, there are history reporting, but no scientific or proper investigation. But number was definitely. So right to life and right to personal liberty, these both important rights were taken away, and my view is this, that right to life exhausts all the rights, right to liberty takes away many rights till the liberty is taken away. So these are 2 most important rights which will adversely affected during emergency.
So we have traveled a long distance since 1975. That was the last time when any sort of national emergency was imposed in India, and that was due to internal disturbance. From 1975, now that we are in 2021, in these about 40 years, 50 years, no further emergency has been declared in the country at a national level. You of course mentioned about the 45th Constitutional Amendment Act, which made it more difficult for the state to impose national emergency, whether external or internal. My question, because you said that it is Article 19 and Article 21, right to life and right to personal liberty, which come under major attack because of the emergency. The way things have evolved over the last more than 4 decades, and the kind of condition we are in today in the country, it appears that even without declaring a formal emergency, Article 19 and Article 21 can come under attack by the government. So, in a way we can say that the government of the day or the legislature, you said it is India is a limping democracy because all the 3 major institutions failed us, legislature, executive, judiciary, whenever emergency was declared. But there came certain occasions when even without formal emergency being declared in the country, these 3 institutions still failed us. Last 7-8 years, the way things have evolved in the country, no emergency is there. And yet, Article 19 and Article 21 continue to be transgressed, and the judiciary has not come to the rescue of those people who have suffered. So, can we say that there is no need for the government to declare emergency to take away people's basic human rights?
Yeah, it says we have traveled a very long time, from emergency, from 1975 till today. Okay, but now what he is saying, even without declaration of emergency also, if we review the situation in the country for past 6-7 years, without declaration of emergency also, these 2 precious articles which you have focused, Article 19 and Article 21, even these articles are being attacked even today. Without emergency also.
Declaring emergency.
So how do you react to this?
My view is this, that so far as our parliament is concerned, that has failed us totally. What is operating is executive will, and that I already said that so far as parliamentarians are concerned, they are, I may say that, slave. We have made amendment in the Constitution that they shall vote according to the directions of the executive. When they have to act according to the direction of the executive, what is the need of the parliament? And there, my submission is this, that so far as India is concerned, that is limping democracy. I already submitted that it is limping democracy. And this is one of the aspects which makes me to come to the conclusion that it is limping democracy, because without declaration of emergency, we are violating many rights. And main thing that preventive detention, that is mainly a emergency measure, not peacetime measure. That preventive detention provisions are made in the Constitution, which is saying that India is nearly in permanent emergency. That is the difficulty so far as Constitution is concerned. That is not a democratic Constitution fully. It is a Constitution which gives a totalitarian power to the executive. During emergency, it is all right, preventive detention is there. International law makes there also the conditions that the detention shall be proportionate, it shall be not violating international law. 3 conditions are laid down: proportionality, non-violation, and equality. These 3 conditions are under international law. Whereas in India, even during emergency, all these 3 conditions, non-emergency period, all these 3 conditions are violated. And main thing is this, that preventive detention till it will survive. For India will be nearly under semi-emergency, which will not be free from emergency. Preventive detention is to be abolished. It is not peacetime measure, it is an emergency time measure. And in emergency also, it should not be disproportionate. It should be applied in restricted cases. But in India, I have said that we have left British rulers, but we have adopted British law. And do not operate in England. There we cannot find these emergencies being declared or during peacetime persons being emergent. We are having colonial law in India which is still prevailing. 75% of the constitution of India is of the colonial period. 1935 constitution, the Indian Act has been incorporated in constitution. Only one thing that is different is fundamental rights. Now, even fundamental rights have no meaning in India. All the fundamental rights were made derogable during emergency. So we are in semi-emergency, and during emergency, we are in lawlessness.
Radical views.
Very interesting point that you were saying that India is a living democracy. But what is the way out then? Is it?
Now you say India is a limping democracy. Then what is the way out then? That's what Madam wants to know.
And also,
Way out is
do you think that the situation is the same whether there is a majority rule or there is a coalition government? Is there any difference between the two?
Whether majority rule or coalition rule, is there any perceptible difference between these two?
my views are radical. According to me, Parliament should compose of only 25-30%. Then this limited group will discuss and they will understand the problems of India.
Then it will be oligarchy, it will not be democracy. Then it will be oligarchy, it will not be democracy.
Oligarchy, no? It will turn into oligarchy.
My views are, I said radical, no majority rule. There should be elections on the basis of merit and within 25 to 30. Elections will be of those persons which will be clean persons of India. At present, what we are getting, about more than 50% are criminals. And unfortunately, these criminals are ruling. But the criminals also are not ruling. They are under control of the executive. Executive is
You
ruling.
are suggesting some changes in these situations so that these
So are you then proposing any changes to stem the rot?
strengthen the institutions?
I
The
am-
situation.
Yes, I am proposing the change that the parliament should be of limited person. There should be no need of the executive to be governed parliament. Executive is different, parliament is different. The elected parliament should be really a check on the executive, not supporter of the executive. At present, what happens, then leaders of the political party, they go in the executive. They have de facto and de jure power over them. In fact, also they command them, and in law also they command. Particularly after the Constitution 52nd Amendment, when it is made that they shall vote according to the election of leaders,
No, I
they are
just
being
kind
commanded.
of when you are suggesting, you have compared the international law and the law in other countries, and I don't think countries where democracy is not there have a better situation of human rights.
No, You compared, you have made a study of other countries also. It's not that, the situation is like the human rights there in other countries.
So far as-
It's not that in other democracies,
In other democracy,
the situation is not like that.
the situation is not like
Is
that.
it the way in which institutions are functioning, or it is just the very existence of democracy?
One important thing is political culture. Political culture. The political culture of India is quite deficient to support a democracy. In England, the emergency of type of India would not be declared because political culture is different. Here, the people of India are not politically aware. Therefore, the difficulty is that we are electing even the criminals, known criminals. Now, I may take the
It's not possible to reform those things by making, changes in the existing laws and ensuring that
We
those
cannot
criminals
make
get
such
elected.
changes, like the way you are suggesting. It's not that.
the way
He has not got the question right.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, is it that we can reform laws and ensure that criminals are not elected and other issues that you're raising, they are not.
Can't we reform, you see, make our laws in such a way that the criminals, they don't come to the parliament? Can't we make such reform in laws?
reform can be made. There is a parliament controlled by the executive. That is the difficulty. Because the executive is interested in criminalizing the politicians. Because executive gets the power because of their support. Mainly the difficulty lies with the voters. Voters are not educated. How we vote? We don't vote according to the merit of the candidate. We see to which group, to which caste a particular person is belonging. And in elections, only caste factor plays a more important role than the education of the people. We don't educate the people during election period.
See, governments have also changed because of the way in which people have voted.
See, governments are also getting changed the way because of these voters, The voters are able to change the government.
Voters at present cannot change the government because their difficulty is this, that they think from narrow angle, my caste, my person. And unless we have broader view, this system cannot be changed. For that, some may say that this adult franchise is proper. My view is this, that once I had said to my head of Department of Law that when we come to voters at whatever stage, we are not independent. In UNESCO, we vote not independently, taking into consideration to which side we should vote. This voting system till works in this way, there won't be proper working of the country. This will be, we will have to find out some other way of recruitment than voting system. At any stage we may go, in UNESCO, how voting are done, I have to cite either to Russia or to America or to England. I don't exercise my vote independently. Independent voting is very difficult. Even I may say that so far as ADM Jabalpur case has taught us, judges also do not exercise independent vote. In ADM Jabalpur, two judges wanted to
I
cite.
just want to ask you one thing. Internal emergency came to an end. What was the reason?
The internal emergency came to an end. What was the reason?
Internal emergency came only for one person's safety. Election of.
Then it was revoked.
It came to an end then. Emergency came to an end. Internal end.
Yeah. But conditions remain the same. So
But the condition remain the same.
Caste is there, class is there, everything is there. So what is it that contributes to revocation of emergency? And what is it that contributes to restoration of human rights?
So far as
It's the same
the
system.
so far as the executive and legislature are concerned, condition of emergency continue. One area where we have radically changed, that is judiciary. Judiciary has given us this basic structure theory. That basic structure theory has controlled much so far as human rights are concerned. And even the recruitment, the judiciary is taken over the recruitment of the judges from the executive. Earlier, executive also played in selecting the judges. Now, collegium is suggesting and executive cannot go against that. The judiciary, I have no full praise for judiciary also, because judiciary also is not working as it should work, but that is human failure. They are independent, if they are failing as human beings. And till human institution will survive, there will be certain difficulties. So those difficulties are to be faced by the people. But to great extent, judiciary after emergency has played a very good role to protect human rights. Public interest litigation has come, which is exposing the acts of the executive. Then the right.
There are some things that are getting mixed up.
Confused.
Yeah. One is about the individuals, how they are performing in a given system. The other is about the conditions that make those people behave in a certain way. The third is about the institutions that prevent or allow that. So what is it that needs to be changed? Is it the individuals? Is it the processes? Is it the institutions? Is it the pressure that comes from below that will work? Because you have mentioned
What are to
about
be
the-
changed, whether it's individuals, whether it's system, whether it's your institutions.
Composition of institutions is to be changed. Institutions are alike. This Montesquieu theory about separation of power, this is alike. But composition should be changed. The parliament should be quite different, separate. No, I may say that presidential form of America is better than democratic form. This is parliamentary form, because they are separate. But even in America, the working on the basis of party, that is creating the difficulty. We should have parliament where it will be impossible for parliamentarians to work on the basis of party. The committee system in parliament, that system is working better than parliament.
So should we move towards partyless democracy?
So that means we should move towards partyless democracy.
Party-based.
Partyless.
Party-based.
There should be partyless democracy.
Partyless.
And parliament should not have more than 25 to 30%. They should be such where they can discuss independently and objectively from the point of the people. They should not think from the political point as to how voters can be caught. This and votings also should be, I am, will move to elite system of voting. Every person voting on caste basis or for personal benefits, that should go away.
I just need to ask.
Basically, it is against democracy. That is
What
what we want.
if you have a parliament consisting of 25 persons, right? Now, if those 25 persons become corrupt and authoritarian, what is the option in that?
Now you are suggesting that parliament should have only 25-30 people. Madam is asking if those 25-30 people become en masse corrupt, then what shall be the...
The most important thing is this, that we are allowing at present corrupt persons to be members. There should be some training system where the person who are contesting, they should pass that examination, be trained in the area, and also character should be seen for admitting them to the training center. Anyone going there, this equality, I am believing in vegetarian equality, not this equality, what may be called. But meritocratic equality is the most important way whereby people can flourish.
You have a bureaucracy which is elected for marriage, which is selected for marriage, right? But when you look at the performance of bureaucracy, it is very satisfactory. You don't have a problem with that.
When you look at bureaucracy, their performance is not satisfactory.
They are selected on merit.
They are selected
On merit.
on merit.
My view is this, that they are corrupt because our higher authorities are corrupt. Now we see this Deshmukh case in Maharashtra. He had said that police officers should collect 100 crores per month, and 400-500 crores were collected. When we are having bosses who are corrupt, we take example from them, and those bosses, because they are required to spend money on elections, they are required to indulge in these corrupt practices. And then they corrupt the people. I believe in outside coming down. If higher authority is honest, lower authorities are less corrupt. If higher authority is dishonest, lower authorities will be more corrupt. So we should see that whatever improvements are to be made, they are to be made at top. If improvements are made at top, the improvements below may not be 10%. I have written somewhere that equality is impossible. Because
Often,
equality is,
often changes at top come only because there is pressure from below.
Yeah, when there is a pressure in below, then only the change comes on the top.
Often it is like
Often
that.
it is like that.
that pressure from below will come only from NGOs. And difficulty in India is this, that because of corrupt system, anyone who comes forward, automatically he is so much pressurized that either he has to give up his goal or he has to indulge in corruption. That is the difficulty. Unless we see that at the highest level, character of person is considered to be important, and only persons of character are appointed, there will be difficulty. Here what is seen, for constable we make inquiry whether this constable is honest, etc. For appointment of Prime Minister, we don't see whether Prime Minister is that honest which we require. From constable you expect honesty, but from prime minister we don't see his character. Anyone can become prime minister and anyone because equality is there. This equality should be changed into Meritorian equality. This is my view. Unless equality is converted in Meritorian equality,
I feel that we have a right to have our own views on things. That is okay. But then, when you are writing a thesis, then you have to have sufficient evidence to prove your point. You cannot simply make a generalistic statement
Since
or.
when you are making a thesis, you should have some evidence to prove your point.
So what is it that proves that
Empirical basis. Empirical basis of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is it on empirical basis you are making such submissions?
it is not empirical study. It is theoretical study. Empirical study, I may repeat myself. I had chosen the subject for PhD, social basis of freedom. Social basis of freedom. And that was empirical. I was said that I have to contact my guides to 400-500 persons, a certain their views about liberty and how liberty can be. I found it very difficult to do that job. And therefore I had changed the topic of PhD and got for the life. So empirical study is not there, it is only theoretical
Where you have
study.
discussed cases and you have derived some findings from that, that is a strong point of the thesis. But where you have just made statements, there are chapters where you have said that it was charisma that contributed to emergency and things like that, where you are not providing any, evidence to prove your point. Not that just did not happen, but the causes attributed to that.
You are making such submissions, is there any support of evidence on what basis you make such submissions?
Case law.
Case law.
This is my personal observation. On the basis of personal observation about the atmosphere and working of the institutions. From my personal experience, I am making these submissions. It is my personal experience that Parliament is not functioning properly.
That no one will dispute, but then the reasons that you are attributing and the solutions that you are offering.
The
do
reasons
not
you are
seem
attributing and the suggestions you are making.
Are not convincing.
So, there should be connectivity with your thesis. Isn't it? Some evidence or some thing to prove.
Evidence that I have got is from the literature. Primary sources, secondary sources, from that I have collected the evidence. How the parliament works, for that I had seen certain parliamentary debates of parliament.
That's
From-
okay.
that
That one
I-
is disagreeing with. That point no one is questioning.
That point nobody is questioning.
But you have to explain to him if he is not able to
No,
understand.
no, what we are saying, I think what I gather from
Yeah.
things that Madam has posed. As far as if a patient goes to a doctor, right, medical doctor, the medical doctor on the basis of his own diagnosis or on the basis of certain investigations comes to a certain point and comes out with a diagnosis that this is the problem, this is the medical ailment from which the patient suffers, right? That's one part of the job over. So we agree with Dr. Ladwani as far as he says that Indian democracy is a limping democracy. All the three organs are compromised. We agree with that also. But when it comes to the second part, when the doctor offers a prescription, what kind of medicines you have to take, we have a strong problem there. In the sense that if you look at the title of the thesis is totally focused on human rights. Protection of human rights is the problem which Dr. Ladwani has posed for himself. But the prescription which he is coming out with runs into a kind of a paradox. The problem which he wants to rectify and the solution which he gives is going to make that problem worse. So if you go to a doctor with headache and the doctor gives you a prescription which the headache turns into a cancer. You get my point? So there's a basic contradiction or a paradox. We all agree that Indian democracy is a limping democracy. The organs are not functioning properly. But when you come to the prescription, a meritocracy is going to defeat the entire purpose of protecting human rights, which is the main concern of all of us here. That is the paradox we are talking about.
No, your suggestions are so paradoxical, not in tune with what you are stated in the thesis. So his point is they are unable to understand you because the suggestions which you have made now, they are unable to find a connectivity between your suggestions, these sort of suggestions, and the topic which you have taken up.
Now, my topic is mainly about the role that judiciary has played. And the topic which we are discussing, that is general.
observations.
That is
Out of
general.
thesis.
Out of
that is,
We are going out of box. It's not connected with what.
I think we admire your academic agility at this age, and that's something for which you need to be saluted, sir. One final question would be, how are you going to get benefit